New York Comic Con's Women of DC Entertainment panel featured an all-star lineup of writers and artists. We caught up with them to find out what inspires them and where the comics industry is headed.
Comics kind of found me. I just kind of was doing illustration work, and Cameron kind of emailed me about Batgirl. Well, you know, would you be interested in working for DC? And I'm like, of course I would be. Are you insane? But just a little problem, never drawn a comic book page before. But he's been teaching me, and he's doing the layouts, and I'm kind of learning as I go, and I'm falling in love and learning so much. And being on these panels, I feel like I'm learning as much as like the people in the audience.
I was a hairdresser who was a bit of a frustrated writer because I'd always wanted to be one but was told I'd never make a living doing it. I started getting on message boards and talking more about comics, which led to writing a column. And comics kind of found me, and once I wrote that very first story, I realized that this was such a magical way and a very unique way to tell stories.
I had stories only I could tell. And this was the only medium that could have done them justice. From pencilers and inkers and editors and colorists and the support network that there is, you know, in the industry, this was the place that they had to happen. This is the only place that they could happen.
Ever since I've been a fan of comics, sci-fi, fantasy, the best stories I've read have been in comics, and I always had the sense that that was the place for me, that was where I was meant to end up. And I'm extremely competitive, so whenever people would tell me, oh, it's so hard to break in, I would just be like, no, I'm gonna go back even harder. I'm gonna like just keep trying and keep submitting.
Definitely David. I mean, he was the driving force behind it. He's always been incredibly supportive of my own personal writing. I think we just had talked about it and thrown the idea around so many times over the last few years, and then things just flowed from there. Once you sort of dip your feet in the water and it feels really good, then you jump in, why not?
I would say the fact that I couldn't be a superhero. Yeah, I wanted to be a superhero, but I was like, okay, comic book art, that I can handle, and I think you get paid for that. And it was just something I was good at in high school. I was drawing, you know, during all of my classes. Going in that direction sort of didn't fall into my lap, but it sort of dragged me to it.
My dad got me my first comic book. I think he just got it for himself, but he would read it to me as like bedtime stories. This was back in the day when they had like spinner racks at the grocery store. So, you know, I'd pick one up, and then the next time we went to the grocery store, I'd be like, oh, can we get another comic? He's like, no. And I was like, okay. So my little child brain was trying to make up all these stories about like what was happening. And a lot of times, you know, if I ever got back to go and reread it, sometimes the story just wasn't as good as the one in my head. And when I think about it, having to fill in the gaps and falling in love with these characters and then kind of making up my own stories for them at a very young age, I think has always made my art sequential. And whenever I think of a story, it's always a comic.
I was working in comic book retail before I really like latched on like this is mine, and I think it's the first time I found a comic that I swear was written just for me. The Vertigo comics, when they very first came out, you know, Sandman and Preacher, I was like, they're writing this just for me. This is my comic. This is my industry.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was that stories really don't have any limits. So if you feel safe and comfortable with what you're doing, then you can definitely stretch yourself further. And if you're doing something that scares you a little bit, like you can still go further because nobody's gonna just put up their hand and stop you.
I was told early on to act like I belonged in the room. I took that to heart, and even though sometimes I was scared and I felt like really like I was the only one with my viewpoint, I took that advice and said, you know, I'm here for a reason.
Write the story that you want to read. I mean, you're never gonna, you know, be able to convince someone else to pick up your book unless you have that passion and that love for what you've created. You're not trying to write the next great American novel, you know, you just want to do something that, you know, can connect with even one person.
To be fearless, you know, it just holds you back if you're scared, and the moment that clicked with me and I just didn't care what anybody thought anymore, I like started making this work that was just like true to my heart, and like all this good stuff started happening. Like I put this work out there that I like to make, and people started hiring me to make more work, like that work I made from my heart.
When I was very, very young, someone once told me, stick to your guns. And visually, it was a weird image because I just imagined like not being able, like having guns and not being able to let them go. But it really helped through high school. A lot of, you know, I was told I wasn't allowed to go to art school. You're not going to make it as an artist. And I was like, you know what? Someone once told me, stick to your guns, and that's what I'm going to do.
Joe Kubert said to like our class, he said, if you're in this for the money, go work in the stock market. You have to do this for the love of drawing and the love of writing comics because you're not going to get paid really well. He said also that you have to have a lot of perseverance, because I mean, at the time the comic book industry was so hard to get into, and he told all of us, he's like, you're gonna have the worst time getting in, so if you really want to get in, you're just gonna have to, what she said, stick to your guns.
Just writing a story that you believe in, and especially writing Wonder Woman, who is such a huge iconic female character, it would be so easy to get caught up in that and what everybody needs her to be. And I really tried to focus, and this was the best advice, on who I want her to be. What's the story I want to tell in her life?
I've been on a lot of panels in my career, and to be on a panel with this many female creators working at one company, all with distinct voices, their own fans and following, it was like the best ever. I mean, it really truly was. We've been waiting a long time.
I feel like we should clap it.
I think we're all pretty kick-ass, so the panel was naturally super kick-ass.
You all are so much fun. You guys are awesome.
We like packed that room.
Yeah.
It's like standing room only.
That's just what we do. We're professionals. We pack rooms.
Want to keep up with everything going on in the world of your favorite DC heroes and villains, plus TV, movies, video games, and more? Well, click subscribe.